AI.
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 Artificial intelligence.
AI is everywhere. It's a buzzword for almost any article and YouTube video, including this one. However, AI could have a massive negative side effect towards the future of game development, and it's a can of worms that we've already opened. Recently, the Screenwriters Guild in the US voted heavily in favour for striking against companies for the use of AI moving forward in game development, the lack of pay keeping up with inflation, and general safety procedures. Today though, we're going to be sitting down and focusing on one of those areas. AI and how its role in games has already been getting played out, but more importantly, how it could affect games moving forward. This won't be a teardown on the use of AI, as like I said, it's been getting used for decades. I'll discuss some of the positives from the likes of quality assurance testing, through to the negatives such as the removal of human creativity that could lead to every single game coming out the same, or using the same information to come to the same conclusion to build the next set of games. So let's sit down, grab a cup of tea, and let's talk about how AI could ruin the future of games.
We've been playing together for a while now. I was wondering, are we friends?
AI has very literally been in use since the inception of video games, due to the very nature of game development requiring AI to be used in some way. If it's an algorithm to understand complex scenarios through to just understanding basic math questions. AI has been getting used ever since the 50s, so it's not much of a surprise to know that it's still heavily ingrained into the way that games are made to this day. However, the type of AI that is being striked against, and the general players would probably have an issue with, aren't the types that sit within those sorts of brackets. The type that people would be worried about typically fall within two types of categories. One has to do with making developers and creators redundant due to its ability to cost a lot less than paying someone a full salary for something that might only be half the value but is good enough to get the job done. The other is interlinked with the first, which is the lack of human emotion and imagination being poured into the games that we love. A recent example of heavy AI usage in a game recently was Starfield.
Oh, this'll be fun.
Whether you like the game or not, one thing that we should all agree on that the game's procedural generation is quite impressive when it comes to its absolute scale. However, it does have one major downside, and that is recycled textures, bases, and enemy layouts. If you spend 10 hours going between procedurally generated planets, you'll probably have a wave of deja vu starting to hit you a couple of times, due to some enemies maybe having the same patterns as others, all the way through to layouts of bases being identical. And this is one of the big issues with procedural generation, is that eventually it has its wall of limitations to create diverse worlds for you to encounter. AI usage and the lack of human connection to a game's world is one of the big reasons that many people feel disenfranchised by the open world market due to its lack of care by many companies who are simply just creating an open world to hit that niche. Some open worlds are entirely handcrafted, but many nowadays have handcrafted parts, but for the most part they just mass duplicate textures, hills, and enemy encounters. This isn't always a bad thing, however the further games move into the territory of utilising AI, the closer we'll get to having games that are almost entirely the same, with the same textures, the same basic storylines, and the lack of human emotion backing those stories. One franchise that heavily utilises AI and improves upon it on each installment is Grand Theft Auto, something that many of us want to see have many improvements within GTA 6. However, GTA 5 has improved on one big area, which is its open world and the way that NPCs and pedestrians interact. At the beginning of the series, we saw NPCs as nothing more than fluff. They didn't even have a form of life within the game world. However, by the time GTA 5 rolls around, we've got so much more quantity in terms of what they do, the routes they take, them going off to actually go and do things out and about. They'll go park somewhere, they'll go do things. They actually have things that make them unique. One thing that I found pretty amusing when I was going through my research for this video was how prostitutes functioned between releases.
This is where the fun begins.
With them being added into the game world within GTA 3, however, the NPCs could do nothing with them. Within 4, they could be picked up by the NPCs but would aimlessly drive around. However, once GTA 5 came out, the services of these prostitutes could actually be used by the NPCs to get the full range of experiences. That's just one way that we saw gradual changes to the AI, let alone the AI responding the way they do with things like the police encounters and being shot at and so on within GTA 5. All of this is only possible due to AI and its ability to be improved over time to create a closer to real life experience. Games with realistic physics engines are only made possible with the likes of AI. Characters having full sets of animations that play out due to certain events is only possible due to AI. However, the last two areas that I wanted to talk about before we dive deep into the future of AI within game development is the way that it's used towards collecting player data and protecting players against unfair advantages within the likes of anti-cheat software. User data is a very basic thing that most of us kind of forget completely about when we're signing into a game. We don't get overly concerned overall with the idea of being tracked throughout the game's experience, but by this point you basically have to accept it if you want to play the game. However, within the world of games, it allows companies and developers to take a lot of their user information into account when building their next game. On a surface level, for any consumer to be able to see would be through the likes of achievements and the completion rate of them. If there was a massive focus on a specific part of the player experience in development that wasn't taken full advantage of by the player base, then why would the company spend even more time trying to innovate on that small thing that a tiny percentage of players actually took advantage of? But another way that it's used is to streamline the experience for the average player and to make the average person have more of an enjoyable time. Which is why we've seen the trend towards things like the length of a game happening over the last decade. We've seen the rise of open world games and battle royales, and this is due to the user data being collected through the years through the likes of achievements and other ways that AI is integrated into the game worlds that enable companies to get this data that lead to the results of cookie cutter games that all feel the same, but the average player doesn't dislike them because overall it doesn't destroy the reason why they're coming back to these games. And overall, it's kind of why a lot of people, for example online, like me, complain about the likes of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but they'll keep churning out these games because most people don't mind sitting there with a game that's completely bloated just because it's a long game time and it feels like it justifies the price. Then we have anti-cheat software, which depending on the software definitely has some suspicious activities going on in its overutilization of your PC and the levels of PC security that it has to embed itself within, but on a surface level it's not a bad thing. Bringing in anti-cheat software to allow players to not have to deal with cheaters all the time because it's able to pretty much get 99% of people who are using cheats is a great thing. It means when you go into matches of Valorant, Call of Duty and Rainbow Six, it is rare to walk into a room full of cheaters. Yes, it will still happen and there is still people trying to get past this, but for the most part, a lot of these baseline cheats don't get through because of anti-cheat software. However, this does require anti-cheat software to be good and understand pattern recognition on the average player's cheating and how they would go about using it to be masked. Modern Warfare 2019 was an example of horrendous cheating issues due to the anti-cheat software not being taught enough at a fast enough rate on how to deal with the players who are accessing cheats, which led to the boycott of Warzone for quite a while. Those are some examples as to how AI is already in use in the world of games, with some having issues, but for the most part it is a great tool for the world of developers. But just before we continue, if you wouldn't mind dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you enjoy long-form video essay content like this where we dive deep into games and topics around the gaming world, then make sure to join along. If you want to join a community of like-minded people who are just going to be discussing games and topics within these videos and helping each other out, then make sure to join the Discord that's down below, and you can join us over in the Exiled Ones Discord. And lastly, if you don't want to support the channel any further for just a coffee a month, then make sure to head over to my Patreon, linked down in the description. You'll receive early access to videos like these and have the ability for one-on-one conversations with me where you can give me your input on anything in particular and just have those conversations. But now let's jump in and discuss how AI could ruin the world of games forever. I want to focus on 5 things in particular that are the biggest worries for me personally around the future of games and the assistance of AI. In my opinion, if all 5 of these are brought entirely into fruition, then most of the games that we play will lack any form of soul, lack any proper story being told, and a lack of real emotion. It'll become like TikTok, but simply for games. It will only be based on how addictive they can make the game, and possibly even unethical ways to keep people engaged in playing the game. So the first place that I want to start talking about is over-automation within the game development due to AI. AI allows game devs to not have to deal with the same mundane starting requirements. This means that game development turnarounds wouldn't take as long. However, what it also leads to later on down the line is over-reliance on the game engine due to the automation that is baked into the software, and how much dev studios will be well acquainted with their engine. An example of this in today's world as of right now is Bethesda and the creation engine. For how long they've been using it, it is mainly due to how well acquainted they are with it. The first real issue with automation is that it starts to strip away from a lot of what makes a game human and taking away from that human touch. There's a reason why a lot of people who work a 9-to-5 desk job in the same cubicle for the whole of their life end up feeling as if they've not lived any of it. It's because everything becoming more automated and as focused on being as productive as humanly possible strips away from the humanity behind the human. Game development is no different. If we walk down the road of heavy automation in the way that game worlds are made, it will lead to a lack of human touch, with us not wanting to explore the worlds because they will all feel the same. This leads to games that are almost indistinguishable between releases. Not just the same game franchise, but everything that you might see within the same genre. Think about how quickly Ubisoft attempted to copy The Witcher 3's formula, and the release of the RPG trilogy with the game that tried to take the most similarities of The Witcher being Valhalla. A game that is the definition of what happens when you strip the humanity away from the game development. It led to a release that was everything it believed made The Witcher 3 popular, but lacked the humanity behind the story and the world design. This is just a taste of what happens when humans decide to make something that's successful, but they take away the wrong lessons as to why people loved those games prior. They're only looking at it through the lens of revenue and not the player experience. Another big issue within automation is that it leads to repetition, mainly within the world of procedural generation. I've personally been enjoying my time within Starfield, however I would be lying if I said to you that the planets that you explore do kind of start to lose their humanity behind them because they start to all feel the same and just a bit cold. As sure, everything is handcrafted, however, this is all handed off to the world of procedural generation, which leads to the same old, which becomes mundane at points. And it will definitely put you off wanting to explore those game worlds. At least with Skyrim, almost everything was handcrafted. You might come across some encounters, like a few caves and forts, that feel similar or the same, but it wasn't to the same scale and abundance as something like Starfield. This is something that we'll see other companies start to utilize more and more to allow the game development process to get finished quicker and hit deadlines, and allow the cost of making a game to go down. The last area that I want to touch on, which can be a double-edged sword within the world of FPS titles especially, is the over-reliance on game balancing automation. Skill-based matchmaking relies on the game's ability to gauge how you perform as a player. This can lead to us having enough of a challenge to feel the desire to improve, but not so much that we end up wanting to put down the controller. The other side of this that I've experienced plenty of times is when you have 4 to 5 really good matches, and suddenly it starts putting you in with players that absolutely demolish you for the next 4 or 5 games. It'll get to a point where you feel like just turning off your Xbox or closing the game on your PC because I just don't want to be dealing with being destroyed every 2 seconds the moment I spawn in. And the alternative is true as well, with a lot of people, especially back in the day to, fake YouTube videos, would intentionally have a load of bad games to get into worse lobbies so that they could breeze through and get things like nuke score streaks within the end of the game. The over-reliance on automation and systems of automation can lead to a negative effect for many of us as the general player. As I laid out just a moment ago, those are just a few parts of automated processes within AI development that there is plenty more to pick from if you look into it. These are just some of the issues that come from over-reliance on automation. One area that I don't think people think about in regards to AI in games is how they'll affect the actual performance of your hardware, especially on low-end hardware. One thing that I honestly respect about Todd Howard was his response to Starfield supposedly not being optimized for low-end hardware.
We really do push the technology, so you may need to upgrade your PC for this game, but it's got a lot of great stuff going on in it and the fans are responding awesome.
And then also, you could have taken from it, you're poor, so get good and get your money up. That's pretty much those two takeaways from that message. And I do agree with him. I think the game was definitely made and worked fine for PCs. I had a good experience with it, but I have a high-end PC. That's the main counteraction. But a lot of people feel as if they should be able to play these higher quality games that have a massive use of AI with things like procedural generation going on almost all the time, but they can do it on a $600 PC. It doesn't make any sense. A massive reason why this is an issue within Starfield is that it utilizes a lot of AI in the way that the game will interact with us as the player and the way that we will explore the world. So it's pretty easy to say that low-end hardware can't easily generate planets or even zones of exploration for those planets. The reason all of this happens is because a lot of what makes an AI function will come from both your CPU and GPU, which means your hardware will be incredibly strained, not only playing the game, but also trying to deal with all those extra tasks in real time that have to do with AI. Sadly, if you do not have good enough hardware, you will see these issues coming to light even more, and since some of the AI algorithms built into games will use multiple cores and threads, means that it can end up having bottlenecking issues. Due to the complexity of many AI models, this can lead to more issues than it might be worth. However, the more we start to move down into the realm of making NPCs more realistic, world functions, and dynamic audio more of a focus and closer to what we want, the more it will intensify the requirements of your PC having to deal with these artificial intelligence algorithms. One of the biggest reasons to fight against AI being used within the game development world has to do with the emotional depth that it provides. Now, this is something that can be very much contested. Some believe that AI can write better and more emotionally deep and richer stories than many people. However, due to the nature of most AI models being far more binary, and especially in the world of game development wanting to find easy ways to cut costs, will only result in bland stories that are getting the job done, not necessarily trying to make an amazing story. As this wouldn't be massively important for many of these companies to do. Many companies nowadays, especially Assassin's Creed for example, have moved away from trying to tell the complex story of what's going on within the world of the Templar vs Assassins conflict and the stories of those characters involved to just hack and slash, and hopefully you'll enjoy playing the game. As beings with emotional interests, it allows us to feel empathy, create stories where villains might have a point, or at least they have understandable motives that are more emotionally convoluted than people might want to believe. It allows us to create villains that live in the history books as some of the best. If we concede the world of storytelling and character depth to AI writing, it will react with unrealistic human dialogue, a lack of subjectivity, and a load of one-dimensional relationships. The reason that these things are so much more important to point out is that we don't want one-dimensional good versus bad stories, as they do not cut it anymore. We've had plenty of them, and they persist in many forms of media. However, humans aren't one-dimensional, and with that, the stories we know aren't either. If you view everything through the one-dimensional world of good versus bad, then you open yourself up to a load of logical inconsistencies, along with plenty of boring stories. It's why one of my biggest critiques of the Assassin's Creed franchise is that they expect players to agree that the Templars are just awful, and the only reason for this is that they desire control. They don't actually explain to you in depth the reasons why they want the things that they do and why those things might be bad for most people. They just go, they are going against any form of freedoms just because they equal bad, and they don't explain to you any proper reason. Only the third game and Rogue truly jumps into this idea of actually understanding the differences between both sides of the assassins and why one might be good and one might be bad, but it isn't simply the idea that both are amazing or one is awful. Within those games, they discuss how they are both not necessarily that great. I think the biggest issue around AI being used in games has to do with ethical concerns. Not just in developers being removed from their roles, but also how AI would be used to affect players' ability to be safeguarded from unethical business practices, and unethical changes towards gameplay to make sure players stay as addicted as possible. The first place that I want to start, as it's the most noticeable, is the ethical issues around AI to replace writers, developers, and general creatives within the field of game development. And the first of those that I want to touch on is going to be voice actors. Voice actors within almost any field are becoming more and more worried around their likeness being used without their consent. We're coming closer and closer, if not already there, to a world where AI can completely recreate our own voices to a point of being so noticeable that you don't even think that it's AI talking. An example of this is something like the channel that made a load of Joe Rogan's entire back catalogue that doesn't exist.
I am not the real Joe Rogan. Let me repeat it once more. I am not Joe Rogan, and the guests are not the people they portray. This is purely fiction, just for fun, so don't go around making little clips for your TikToks and make the world believe I said things I never said.
And they created things like an Andrew Tate and Donald Trump podcast when neither of those things have ever existed. However, because they've all spoken at such lengths on the internet, the AI is able to generate a full way of talking to each other. So it's not necessarily a surprise that we're getting to a point where voice actors are worried about their voices being used without their consent, or even being used with consent but having it changed later on when the work is being done, when it's not the work that they actually put in. So instead of them having acted out the lines, the company just adds it through with AI. The biggest one that might remove people from the jobs is the company using AI to create a baseline of games, which will remove the requirement for many devs and the reason why entry-level jobs exist. We know that AI is used within game development, and is used within game engines which act as a tool to help developers, but I do believe that this can be a negative thing. We also know that the more easily these things can be automated would equal a faster development time. A massive issue that comes with AI is that a lot of jobs that come with the actual, being able to make a game and not have it just run awfully at the start comes from that human experience of building the game from the ground up. AI should be used as more of a tool to help the developer than completely eroding the requirement of them. The last area of ethics that I would like to talk about is how AI is used to impact the player. From manipulative tactics for monetization, through to the addictive gameplay that would end up being nothing more than your typical gambling machine. You could use the argument that a lot of this already exists even without AI, which I do agree with you. It's why these issues are things that I highlighted within my second video about the state of modern games within the video Gaming is Dead. With the use of AI algorithms, we would see this taken to an extreme. We would see even more games that are being made to be as dopamine heavy as possible, solely for the idea of getting players to keep playing and wasting away their time on a game that is designed to try and keep them hooked in the same way a drug might do for many people or gambling machines might do for many. And what's the end result in that? Solely so that they can eventually get your money as well. You'll see them trying to get you hooked on a game simply to put you into the world of their microtransaction hellhole, overpriced DLCs, and helping hit higher player counts so that they're valued even higher by their shareholders. But my biggest issue within the world of AI being introduced within game development is the removal of human creativity. We heavily underestimate how amazing the human mind is. We only seem to value everything through the lens of the technical aspects. We only talk about games, especially online, through the lens of graphics, FPS, performance, animation, and much more. But one area that we completely remove for some reason and disconnect is the emotional connection that we have with them. I've spoken about this in quite a few videos recently around this idea of how we need to shift away from the technical and lean towards how a game makes you feel when you're giving your overall thoughts about a game. As that's truly where the human creativity lies, the human emotion and experience from real people creating something. One of my biggest examples that I've always found massively interesting is George R.R. Martin and the whole world of A Song of Ice and Fire and the world of Westeros that was all created from one person's mind. The mind is incredible. The fact that we're able to do that and have entire histories and worlds, laws, races, and everything in between all compiled through just one mind being able to create that is ridiculous. And that is no different within the world of games. The most obvious area of removal of creativity would be the stories we're being told. AI will be designed at first to streamline the processes within the world of storytelling. So that might come in the form of either simplifying the way that stories play out, baseline assertions on what is good versus bad narratives, and stereotypes of characters, or even changes to stereotypes to forcefully go against any form of stereotype. We don't want to live in a world where every single video game is the same cookie cutter Marvel approach of the stories being played out. It's similar to how whenever I go into almost any game out there, I'm just waiting for someone to betray us, as it's become such a standard trope within the world of storytelling and games in particular. We don't need every single game out there to play out like The Last of Us. Otherwise, it would take away from the stories being told and giving them a level of uniqueness. Stereotypes are also a massive issue. Not because I don't think stereotypes make sense, they're stereotypes for a reason. However, if an AI model is made to create characters in a specific way, and that's the only way that they know how to act out those characters, and the ideas of these stereotypical approaches would result in mostly every single character being well defined by their appearance and how they would act, solely through the lens of stereotyping. And again, the reverse is completely true. They may end up saying to companies how they don't want any form of stereotyping in any way to so-called empower people, which could end up disconnecting many people from having an actual connection to these characters that feel like them. And that's one massive thing that people seem to just let go of nowadays, acting as if worlds from stories from the big screen to the small screen all the way through to games, as if we're not meant to relate to these characters in any way. We don't want AI to come in and automate the process of character creation and storytelling. Otherwise, it could result in overly predictable characters and stories, or the complete reverse, overly predictable characters and stories that are nothing more than mouthpieces for viewpoints on our current world. Risk aversion is another one as well that's a big issue within the AAA gaming space that could become even more exacerbated due to AI. With a lack of human creativity, AI would be used in a way for companies to understand what they believe would work to create the most profitable product, instead of a product that is both profitable and emotionally captivating. If AI is used by companies to market research the easiest ways to become money printers, the products that we'd end up seeing all the time will be new battle royales, new massive shooters, and the massive open world markets. Yes, we've got many of those already, but we've still got plenty of games being made within other genres alongside it. It creates games that are all within the same genre, as we already have, but with the added on part of the same gameplay mechanics across all of them, with good enough storytelling that doesn't really innovate on anything in particular. The use of AI within games for me isn't the case of changing the landscape of games, but simply bringing the problems that we already have with the likes of greed and a lack of change to another level, as companies use the technology to get work done faster, to learn about what keeps people hooked for longer, and what will make you spend more of your money. I want to take a moment away from talking about how AI will affect games in the future and talk about AI within headsets, and more in particular, the sponsor of today's video, Corsair and SoundID. I've spoken about these headsets in prior videos, but here's a quick rundown for those who don't know. I have hearing sensitivity in both of my ears, something that I was completely aware of prior, and it was making it a massive inconvenience, especially when I play many different games, which meant that I just had to turn down the general volume to play them, so I never really felt as if I was being accommodated much when I was in the gaming experience. However, ever since SoundID sent me out the Corsair HS80 Maxes, I've been able to actually play games, explore the worlds and enjoy my time within them, and even jump back into games that I used to really enjoy playing, like Apex Legends, but I ended up veering away from because I couldn't stand the sound of the cracking armor. The way it works is that if you have the HS80 Max or the HS65 Surround or Wireless, all have built into them SoundID technology. Once you've got the headset out of the box, all you need to do is a quick 5-minute sound calibration, which will create you a sound profile. For me, this shows that I've got issues with higher frequencies in both of my ears, which means the software is able to deal with those sorts of issues when they come up, such as doors creaking, armor cracking, or flashbangs going off. Now, SoundID sent me out the HS80 Maxes a couple months ago, and I've been using them and really enjoying the experience with them. They retail at £170, so they are more on the premium end. However, recently they ended up sending me out the HS65, which is their more budget-friendly option. This one comes in at £80 retail, and honestly, outside of the weight, that is the only noticeable difference. The volume, the audio, everything about it, even the build quality feels great with these, and honestly, it ends up making you question at time to time of the premium headset and so on. I'd still say that you could tell the slight difference, specifically with higher end music. You can hear it a little bit better through the HS80 Maxes, which obviously, if you're going to be listening to music quite a bit, maybe it's something of your cup of tea. However, one thing that I do love about the HS65s over the HS80s is that they have a memory foam ear cup, which is like a leather sort of feel. And honestly, I prefer it over the sort of mesh that you get with a lot of different headsets. It just keeps my ears cooler. So I kind of wish I had that option with the HS80 Maxes. And one thing that's great is, as of the time of recording this, all the way up to the 27th of November, you've got the Corsair Black Friday deal. So if you head over there, any SoundID enabled headset, which is the HS80 Max, the HS65 Wireless, and Surround, all three of those have got SoundID enabled technology built in. So if you are interested in picking one of these headsets up, make sure to go check out that down below. However, AI isn't all that bad. That is all a load of negatives that I believe will happen no matter what. However, it's down to the company's owners, shareholders, and the people working as devs, writers, and anything across the board, including us as the players, to not allow companies that maliciously use AI to stay afloat. As I said, these are some of the negative aspects of AI. However, I don't want this video to solely be about negativity. I do want to bring forth some positives so I can discuss how AI could massively help the gaming industry even more than it has done over the last 70 years. One of the areas that AI can help towards games moving forward is enhancing the overall experience with the likes of adaptive gameplay, physics, and the way music and sound effects interact with the player. I think the first of those is going to be the most interesting to see in the future. Many people like to say things like Souls games don't need an easy mode, which I don't think they need an easy mode. I just think that they would be, better off also including it so that the games weren't so rage-inducing for other players. Before people start saying, well, that's the way the game is designed, which is a true statement. But the question that I would ask more than anything is, how would having an adaptive gameplay AI or an easier mode for less skilled players be a bad thing? Companies can still focus on making a game that is difficult and then changing parts of it for players who want an easier difficulty. In regards to the world of Souls games, you might think that having an easy mode would take away from your experience. However, it wouldn't take away from your experience, it would simply open the doors for other people, as you can always play the game on whatever difficulty you feel like playing it on, whilst other people just don't end up wanting to play the game. And I think something like an adaptive difficulty would allow us to actually find a good middle ground for most players. There's no need for the amount of gatekeeping that happens within the Souls community. I know I've just had a random tangent about the Souls community, but overall I think something like an adaptive AI could be introduced to allow many people to get into this game without people feeling as if they're being completely screwed the entire time, or as if there is no challenge at all. Game developers, along with casinos and data provided by scientists, show that most people want to be involved in a state of play, but they don't want to be beaten all of the time. It's why two kids, if they are playing together, if one is always winning, the other will feel no reason to care about even joining in ever again. They won't ever want to participate, because what's the point of wasting their time on something that gives them no added value outside of increased stress and making them know that they're useless. It's why you always have to let the person win every now and again to give them hope for the next time. The same goes as well for games. If you're someone who wants to enjoy the gameplay style of a Souls game, but you don't really enjoy the overly difficult bosses, then there should be an option from the opening of the game that basically just says, do you want to use adaptive difficulty, or do you want to just play the game as it is out of the box? And I think that would be a better way of approaching it, as I don't want to be wasting my time doing something that's annoying me with no feeling of reward or actual value being added. Which I know you've already been typing out the comments, something along the lines of, you're just trash, stop talking about the Souls community, which is understandable, but it doesn't take away from the idea that an adaptive difficulty being introduced through AI would allow the game's experience to be challenging enough for players to feel like they're actually overcoming an obstacle, but not so hard that they feel as if they've had enough and they just want to quit. With adaptive difficulty, it would also open the doors to more replayability towards the games that we love. One of the big areas that I believe almost every single game company would love to be able to say is that the average player spends thousands of hours in their game world, but this only comes by two things. One is what I discussed within my relaxing games video, which is this idea that allows you to just chill out, watch something else like YouTube or Netflix whilst you're playing this game, as it doesn't require your full attention for you to gain the value that's being added by the game. But the other, and probably the most valuable for long-term players connecting, is replayability. The reason that many RPG games are so replayable and loved is that you can just load them up and play a different class or test out different storylines that you didn't try prior. With AI, this would just be intensified, allowing players to get into a new world that still has many of the features that keep you coming back for the familiarity, but enough that allows you to feel like you're having a fresh experience from the likes of your skills that you acquire, the way that NPCs interact with you, through to the placement of resources and loot. These things already exist within games with the likes of RNG mechanics,
Natural 20!
but overall could be improved by AI within the next 10 years, and you could see MMOs becoming even more popular due to their replayability factor. One amazing area that we've seen improvements in over the years is physics engines with the likes of racing games and pretty much any virtual world that requires them. With the likes of racing games, it allows us to feel even more immersed into the experience, as if we're driving through those harsh environments presented to us, or as if we're turning the corners like it would actually feel like in real life. It's even got to a point now where you've got some content creators who started with racing games and simulators and now actually do racing in real life.
In today's video, we're going to be reflecting on my first year as a racing driver, I suppose.
So the further that we see physics engines improve due to the advancements of AI, the more that we'll probably see that happening at a larger scale. The last area that I also wanted to mention is sound effects and music. Game soundtracks are already amazing with how they transition and bring around sound effects to truly immerse you, but I would love to live in a world where we have more variety in which soundtracks will actually play, based off of the landscapes and making you feel even more immersed within specific areas and connecting certain songs to those sorts of areas. Instead of having 5 songs playing in rotation, it would allow us to have way more of a diverse experience and have them connected to specific parts of the game. Another area that I'd love to see improved upon is AI generated sound effects to immerse you truly into the space that you're walking around. From the birds chirping, having different and slightly different chirps for the different types of birds that they are, to the different textures on the stone that you're walking across and having that different sound playing due to it, and even the change in thickness of the dirt that you're crossing. All of this is just added extra detail that most companies really wouldn't care about improving past a basic level. However, once more AI becomes more sophisticated with adding these things into the game, the more ability that game companies are going to have towards having even higher intensity of immersion within their sound effects. One area that would be incredibly useful, especially in the world where we've got game releases that are completely broken or just have some bugs but they are glaring issues, but somehow make it past testing and make it into the final copy, is quality assurance. A lot of what I'll be discussing already exists within the world of game development, however all of these things, if improved, which hopefully is the priority of many of these companies, would result in a load of games that are actually borderline finished without much issue. Automated testing would be one of the biggest areas that AI improvement would be phenomenal for companies, and even smaller devs if they're able to build it in for higher quality engines. With general functionality testing needing to be improved upon, from how we see many games being released nowadays where you'll have certain things like objects just going through people and enemy hitboxes. We know that this needs to be improved, and especially with the future push towards AI being more and more prevalent, we should hopefully see more game experiences that are just improved and polished. Performance optimization is also massively important. One of my favorite games of this year was Jedi Survivor. However, it didn't release particularly amazingly, and it did have performance issues, especially around its FPS not being stable and general quality not being up to scratch. There was even a moment where I had to cheese a part of a mission because there was 3 enemies that would start attacking me, and no matter how many times I reset the level, I'd have the same issue where the FPS would drop to such an unbearable level that I was unable to even protect myself or see hits coming. Having a better system to not allow these issues to break through the cracks is massively needed in today's world of game development, when all we see are games that are being released with requiring patches within the first week to fix copious amounts of issues, just because the company couldn't wait a week and ignored the issues, or somehow just it passed testing. Load traffic as well is massively important. When I first played GTA 5 when I was 11, I ended up trying to jump onto online once it came out, and due to a mixture of issues, one of them just not having prepared enough servers to deal with the amount of people jumping on, and also my Wi-Fi not being particularly great, meant that I had to wait a whole week to even be able to jump on, and based off my conversations with many people around that time, and even looking back on it now, many people had the same issue, that it's because they didn't have enough servers to deal with the issues. We also saw this sort of issue with the likes of Overwatch 2's release. Hopefully with the launch of GTA 6, when that online comes out, we'll end up seeing a game that can actually be played right away, with extensive AI load tests having been done on the servers to ensure that we can actually play the game and it won't just crash and go down within a minute. Then we also have bug detection, and this could be massively important moving forward. As the more automated game releases become, hopefully this also means that more automated ways will be done to try and deal with issues that arrive within the development stage later on, and won't require people to constantly be going back and dealing with issues that arise. Hopefully with some form of actual bug detection that works and is able to do it in a more intelligent manner, it means that more of these things will just be picked up due to people not having to play the game and the AI basically being like, hey, there's this issue, it shouldn't be doing this, please fix me. One area as well which would improve that side of it is general bug pattern detection. When we as the player experience a bug, we will simply just, have to express it via word of mouth, or maybe you record it, or for some, send the email to a company. However, in most cases, it won't really be highlighted until many videos start popping up randomly. But with sophisticated AI, we'd end up being able to send to developers these issues when they arise, just by the AI being able to send it automatically when we, sign in and we have to accept having our data being taken. Why isn't there a way that we can just send this information without us having to really do too much to do it? For us to be able to help towards the game's usage from the likes of people falling through the sky, falling through the ground, all the way through to us not being able to speak to a particular player because for some reason there's been an issue with the gameplay experience. With better, sophisticated AI, we'd end up having way less bugs and better bug optimization, hopefully. Preferably though, these bugs would be taken care of prior to release with a mixture of things like crash prediction technology, real-time monitoring, and priorly mentioned bug detection, which would then be able to utilize things like stress testing and player recreated playthroughs via AI that could run alongside game testers. Hopefully they would run alongside them instead of trying to remove them entirely, as that is definitely what companies will try to do, is remove requiring people to play the game. They'll probably try and find a way of AI doing it. However, if we could do both of them at the same time, we'd probably have way more impressive polish on game releases if this was done at a mass scale. The last area that would be really impressive to see more improvement is more realistic NPCs. Something that I mentioned earlier is the likes of GTA utilizing them properly. With very recently an AI mod being removed due to Rockstar that allowed you to talk to an AI with a full conversation. This would be something that we would be able to see more within the future of open world RPG games to give us more of that player experience of feeling as if we're connected to our character due to the responses being based on our actual reactions, so we'd have to live in the head of our characters. This is still something that would need heavy amounts of work to work properly and be taken in a way that isn't just negative to the player experience, but overall we could see some amazing process towards player immersion. One area though that could definitely use some improvement within something like GTA 6 is improving in the way that police function and the reactivity and adaptivity of the nature of those AIs. They are supposedly doing this, so that is great, but with games we want to feel like the NPCs are actually acting in a way that feels real and not just an automated response. We don't want to have a moment where a guard is attacking you with his weapon and you hide around a corner, the stress level goes down, they stop searching for you, and out of nowhere they just sheath their weapon and act like nothing happened, as that takes away from the immersion. Having an actual reaction system that allowed these worlds to feel more realistic due to the way the AI are interacting with us is going to be a way forward that would be so much more immersive for people to play in. Having actual reactions that match the state of the world is probably the most important thing for player immersion, and is one of my main criticisms of something like Skyrim, due to the lack of reaction that people have towards stuff like the war whilst it's going on between both sides, and then after gaining control of different places in the aftermath. You might have some things here and there, but for the most part, you never really hear much about why people like it or dislike it, or see player growth. You might have some things here and there, but for the most part you never hear much about it from anyone. One area that could really help towards NPCs is how characters themselves grow over time. As most games, the NPCs don't really show any signs of growth, change in ability, views, or appearance. But something like a new AI model being developed that allows NPCs to require haircuts, clothes being changed and cleaned, and just growth in character would be really interesting to see. All the way through to something like characters just having a conversation with each other and them changing their mind in a way that doesn't feel overly robotic, and it actually feels like proper lines of dialogue between each other, questioning it and trying to understand something. All of this is stuff that would be cool to see with AI, however I don't think will be happening in the near future, but maybe within the next 10 to 20 years of game development we might see things like characters being able to actually have conversations conversations with each other without it feeling overly robotic. AI will be getting improved upon moving forward, and that won't change if you're completely against it being utilized. We'll see game companies try and use AI to replace the workers and being used as a great tool by others as well. I do believe that we'll hit a time where there will be an over-reliance on AI to create games and the gaming experience, which will cause a lot of people to either quit outright or hold off from buying any products until they've heard of any good changes about the industry. I do believe that in the long run, AI will be used in a way that is more of a tool than something to simply stay here to replace workers. If companies are going to continue moving forward with the progression of AI in games, I think us as the consumer need to hold them incredibly accountable with our wallets. If a game gets released and a company has chosen to replace all of their staff with a form of AI to create the new game, and I'm guessing then most likely that game would be released unfinished and probably not very well polished. I don't believe we're close to a world where an entire game could be created via AI, especially not at a large enough scale. But in a moment where a company like EA, Ubisoft or Activision might start trying to find ways to cut back on spending every year to increase their profit margins, we might be awaiting the day where mass loss in profit will happen because they've chosen to adopt AI and people just aren't happy with it. So when the day does come where a company chooses to do this, I believe for the greater good of the future of this media, from the amazing stories that humans are able to make, better due to their own lived experiences or creative minds through the amazing designers who are truly bringing a world to life in the visual form, we need to not look at purchasing these games, as it's a can of worms that if opened will lead to games that are nothing more than extreme copy and paste and will be at a massive scale that means that pretty much everything will feel the same. For AI to be used in an ethical, justified way, I believe it just needs to be used as a tool to improve the experience, to aid developers and designers. It should only be getting used to help us instead of replacing the requirement of us. I'd love to know what you think about AI moving forward in pretty much any realm, not just, within the realm of games, but in the realm of games, where do you think it is going to lead? Where do you think game companies will take it? Do you think game companies like EA or Activision will try and replace some of their workers with AI? Or do you think a lot of them will just stick to using people? I do believe that most of them will stick to using people because they know that people bring value. However, I am worried to a degree to see when a company does try to make a game with the majority of it being made through AI instead of any form of human development. But if you do want to join a group of like-minded people who want to just have some friendly chats and conversations around games and general stuff, then make sure to come join the Discord down below. And if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to leave a like and do subscribe for more content on this channel to come. And if you're watching this prior to December and you're wanting to stick around for that time, there's going to be 3 massive videos coming out during that time. So I hope you're along for the ride for those. So with that all being said, I hope you guys found this video enjoyable or entertaining or valuable in some way, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.